Here we go, part 2 of Gold Digger. Is that what I was calling it? Goldmember. Gold Digger was a different build. This is Goldmember. Yeah, so you remember how it was like, be quiet for reverse plate fans, blah, 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 blah. After we filmed that, they actually then announced the reverse plate fans. So these are gonna be coming out. I actually have Nick running to pick a few up. We got access to some of them early, thank God. Because I was not gonna postpone this build to wait till April to receive those. So perks of the trade, I guess I'm gonna take advantage of it where I can. So now we are gonna have the reverse blade here. This particular part's gonna be probably a little bit more montagey than vloggy, only because it's gonna be a lot of very boring measuring and bending of tubes and such, trying to figure out what I'm gonna do with my loop order. May or may not still go push-pull up here. I just haven't decided. So yeah, we need to see if we can figure this out. The all-new Silent Loop 3 from BeQuiet is finally available in the United States and features a new damped pump design with a 6-pole motor for ultra-quiet operation, giant cold plate with Threadripper compatibility, tasteful and minimalistic RGB design, and is available in 240, 360, and 420mm variants, providing plenty of cooling for even the most demanding CPUs of today. The refill port and provided coolant mean you never have to worry about evaporation leading to pump failure, providing a longer life and less downtime and cost for your rig. To see the full list of specs and features, follow the sponsored link in the description below. So I'm still not 100% convinced I'm gonna leave this turned this way at the angled mount, because the bottom mount can be reversed to make it flat, or you flip it around to make it angled like this. I think it's gonna depend how it looks when I get the reverse blades in here, because now we're gonna have the white ring on the top, it's gonna look like these guys here, but facing us. So now it may or may not look weird with it being an angle with the same design as the top here. So I don't know. I need to see what they look like once Nick gets back from picking those up. I still might go push-pull up top here just to fill in some of this dead space. And to be honest, since this is gonna be the only exhaust for the system, to potentially overcome the amount of resistance that there's gonna be here. As I showed you in part 1, the mesh material on the top is not exactly the best porosity. I think it's less than 50%. So that means more than 50% of it is solid versus open. So that is exactly going to equate to that much restriction in terms of airflow as if there was nothing in front of it at all. Plus we have to consider the fact that we're pushing through a 60mm radiator. We're asking a lot of these fans, although they do have great RPM, they do have great noise to performance ratio. They also have great static pressure. I'm asking a lot of them. So I'm probably gonna end up going push-pull on these anyway, just to make sure I can overcome the amount of resistance. So I think that's gonna be important. Loop order, I kind of mentioned that in the last video, but I'm sort of rethinking things a little bit. I may or may not consider doing a parallel loop between the GPU block and the CPU block, just to help reduce the amount of restriction in the loop. I do have a lot of radiator for a single D5 to handle. Fortunately, by having the big fat radiator means the rows are thicker, which means less resistance across the rad. Believe it or not, the thinner the rad, the more resistance the flow is through there, because of the fact that you are having half the amount of tubes inside of it, giving us an area for coolant to flow through. So by having fatter radiators and a 420 means there's a wider area per half. Remember, it's a dual pass rad, so it means it goes in one side, turns, and comes back out the other side. By having the radiator bigger overall in both dimensions actually reduces the amount of restriction through it. But we do have 3 radiators and one of them is a slim rad. So yeah, the D5 right now is set to max speed. It is a manual pump, so I can just literally bring a screwdriver in here and boop, boop. I'd rather do that than PWM. I don't like the PWM pumps. They're a pain in the ass to bleed, because some pumps like to, if they don't sense a PWM signal, are supposed to default to 100% pump speed. That's like kind of the default. Some pumps, I don't know why the logic board is different in some D5s than others. If there's no PWM, it just defaults to its lowest setting. And that is not fast enough to move air out of a system. So I like to use the manual pump wherever possible. That's just the old school part of me there. So I may or may not consider trying to do a parallel loop between the GPU block and the CPU block. Now what that means is, because I have 2 ports on the bottom of the GPU and 2 ports on the top of the GPU, I could come in one side and come out the other, but the flow would be coming straight through the GPU and out into the CPU block, but half of the flow will go through the GPU and then the rest will go through the CPU. It'll equalize wherever the equal flow rate is between the two. Now, because they're not the same block, one might flow greater than the other. So they'll just equalize. Let's say this was less restrictive than the CPU block. more fluid to go through the GPU block than the CPU block, but they would still divide the flow between them to equal 100% of the flow rate of what is going in has to equal coming out. That confuses people. Whenever I've done parallel loops, especially with SLI, and I would have them going straight through into both GPU blocks, people always just assumed it was gonna just go straight through and bypass the thing along the way, but that's not how fluid dynamics work. Fluid dynamics will always equalize flow between the path of least resistance. And it will flow, believe it or not, through and fill up the first block, but as soon as it hits resistance there, then the flow will divide amongst the other channels. So if I were to have this be a completely clear system and start filling up a parallel loop, you would see the fluid kind of bypass the first opening, and then as soon as it's full, you would see it make that turn, and then they would all meet on the outlet together. So it's a nice way of cleaning up the tubing sometimes, but in this one it would be interesting because I have two horizontal fittings versus two vertical fittings, so I'm not sure if I can make that look right. So I've just got to play around with that. That's why I say today's video is going to probably be a little bit more montagey with Phil sort of just capturing footage and making it interesting to watch as I sort of just go and see what happens. All right, that's enough talk. Let's just start doing and see what happens. It's done. It's got a few micro bubbles in there that have to work their way out, but yeah, it's done. Pretty straightforward build. Actually, the entire loop was done in an afternoon. It took 2 days build time for me to do this one, which is pretty quick, I guess, considering the fact that I like to really kind of get stuck on simple little things, like trying to make sure things are as perfectly level as they can be and lots of little trimming and kind of reworking ideas on how I want to do the loops and such. I'm pleased with how the drain turned out. So I did use that EK drain, like I said. I didn't use any of the EK gold plugs because I forgot I actually bought gold plugs. So these are the Barrow gold plugs. They look just like the regular EK little chrome ones, but they're gold, obviously. This is nice because it's inline, it's permanent. There's no like flex tube hiding anywhere. You can actually just take a barb fitting and some tubing, hook it into the back right here through the pass-through fitting, which is easily accessible by opening the back door. And then that can drain. And the cool thing is that once you open the cap up here, it'll let a lot of fluid out. The thing is, because we have a rad up here, we have a rad here with fittings at the bottom. Obviously we have a rad that's below the entry point of this fluid right here. You could actually hook a compressor up to that. Now, you don't want to put too much pressure to it.
Oh, don't Jesus Christ!
But if you were to keep it at fairly low pressure but keep pushing air in there, the air entering will force the water to make its way out here. Now the idea wouldn't be to necessarily get the loop completely empty, but empty enough to where you can get components out if you needed to work on it. Now I didn't do the fill port yet. I may or may not, I haven't decided. I just did the squeeze bottle method to get it to fill. But one of the reasons why I think I might do the fill port coming from behind the radiator over to here is for an aesthetics reason. It would allow me to get that reservoir fully topped off to where there would be no air visible in it at all, which to me would be more pleasing than seeing the top always have a little bit of air in there, which is designed to do. You can also see I reused the black plate right here that has the JayzTwoCents logo on it from the original Reservoir. The Singularity Computers part's up there under the rad, but that's just because I had to make it clear the thing right here. So might eventually get myself some little metal plaques etched or made or something to start putting in these builds. Kind of like the DeBauer Lee and Lee thing, but only it would be my logo. Yeah, lots of radiator space in here. Two 420mm radiators that are 60mm thick, plus a 30mm thick rad as a 280. That's an awful lot of rad. The reverse blade fans changed everything about the look. And I'm happy I went back to flat with this radiator because I think now it has symmetry, not symmetry, but it's consistent throughout. I'm so happy that these became available and that BeQuiet allowed me to get some of them early to use in this build, because I told them, I said, guys, I'm doing a build right now, like using these fans. I need these reverse blades after they announced them after the last video. Also, I have to give a huge thanks to Performance PCs. That is where I get pretty much all of my water cooling gear from. If I don't order it direct from, like, say, Amazon, like these Barrow fittings came from Amazon. A handful of the standoffs and such actually came from Performance PCs. They carry all the Barrow stuff too. The radiators came from Performance PCs. The Optimus blocks came directly from Optimus, but with the help of Performance PCs, because they know the guys, so they reached out to them. So we were able to get some pretty high-end stuff. Obviously, the Singularity Computers Reservoir came all the way from Australia, courtesy of Daniel at Singularity Computers. I mean, it's a pretty sick build. I kind of want to keep it. It's the more I look at it, I'm like, oh, it's like the gold version of Nebula, but very classy looking and feeling. Let's talk about temperatures, because obviously, with all this radiator space in this big old giant case, if the temperatures aren't amazing, then what does it matter? So I can tell you right now, so for the GPU test, I ran Speedway at a loop, and the hottest it got whatsoever on the GPU, and this is all graphed out for you here, but the hottest it spiked at all was 42.7 C on the GPU temperature and 48.6 C on the hotspot. That is literally 5.9 C delta between the hotspot and the edge temp. That's nuts. Normally we see 10 to 15 and call that reasonable. That's pretty standard. Under 10 is amazing. Under 7 C difference, that is actually kind of bonkers. This backplate right here on the Optimus block, remember how I showed you it's one giant thermal pad? This sucker gets toasty during gaming, so it's actually doing something. Now I don't have any actual direct airflow over it. It's all on the bottom, obviously, but any airflow that can touch that would only help. But I truly believe this thick thermal pad in the entire back of the 4090 with this big, thick heatsink design. It does have some heatsink to it. It's not a crazy heatsink, but it does have some sink design in there. It's actually helping pull some of that heat through the back of the card as well. So that's one of the reasons why I think the temperatures are so freaking good. But that's an RT test, and it was at full tilt and running for 15 minutes. And as you can see by looking up the chart here, the temps are absolutely amazing. And one thing to point out, that's what these fans at pretty low, about 800 to 900 RPM idle speed, because there's no logic built into the motherboard at the moment, because I think you can use their fan control software or use fan control, which you talked about in the past, to map fan curves to different components other than the CPU. So right now, during that gaming load, the CPU went from 41C at the start of the test to 47C by the end of it. That's not enough temperature change to force the fans to speed up because they're mapped to the CPU. So that was just the GPU getting basically idle speed on these fans with the push-pull on the top and the standard pull on the bottom and the pull on the side. Clearly there is plenty of radiator to keep it nice and cool. Also, the temperatures in this room are cooler than my room at home typically, so ambient temperatures affect your overall temperatures, as I've explained. But the temperatures are great. 42.7 C as a spike, and it was much lower than that as an average. It's pretty awesome. Let's talk about the CPU, because that is mapped to the fans. I'll just do a Cinebench run for you right now. We did a 15-minute Cinebench test. You know, one of the reasons why we do usually we do a 30-minute test for water cooling with AIOs is because saturation is a thing. There's so much volume in this loop. The amount of heat that the CPU puts off cannot saturate this loop. Like it normalizes really quickly because we have more thermal capacity in this setup than the CPU could ever do at 200 and something watts, because we do have PBO enabled on this. I'm like, there's no way we're using an overclocking X3D CPU and this much cooling and this much money in a water loop, which is, with these blocks, this is probably close to $1,000 loop. It is not cheap. There's no way we're gonna not enable some sort of overclocking. So Cinebench R23, as you know, is a very difficult test to run. It's very hard on the CPU. It spikes the temperatures really high, and it really finds instabilities quickly. But if I just do a single run right now on multi-core, the speeds are insane. It'll actually hit 5.4 gigahertz all core on both the X3D die, the V-Cache die, and the performance die. Fans are ramping up nice and smooth. I have a slow ramp on them, that way it's not jarring to your ear to hear them ramp up suddenly. You know, like a la NZXT's latest cam software. That's a 46,125. It is performing very well. This CPU absolutely destroys my 14900K that I have at home. And I'm overclocked a lot on that CPU. And I have a 300 watt limit on that CPU. And I have a 480 millimeter rad dedicated to just that CPU. And it still hits 85C, and it does not hit this score. I get about 42,000 with all my software turned off. To hit 46,125 with PBO enabled is nuts. Was getting about 44,250-ish with PBO not enabled. 71C. It's a 95C chip. There is plenty of head. That is a 46,327. I mean, that's crazy. That's higher than I was getting on the 9950X. And this is the X3D. There's nothing wrong with my system at home. I'm just telling myself I don't need it, but I do want it. I think anyone that's an enthusiast in PC can agree with me there. You don't need any of this, but you want it. Of course we want it. Anyway, this is not my build. This is Chris's build. So I hope he's gonna be happy with that. Temperatures are insanely stable, or temperatures? Yes, the temperatures are very stable. The overclock, which is just PBO, is very, very stable. I don't even have it doing the, actually, I think I might have it doing a minus 20 millivolt right now. I think I used the, let's find out. Let's go into the BIOS and see if you're curious as to how I was getting these particular scores. I did nothing except enable EXPO on the 6400 megahertz Crucial RAM, which is also 64 gigabytes of it in here. I did find gold G-Skill RAM, but it was non-binary RAM, so it was only 24 gigabyte variants, so 24, 48, 96. The problem with that, the particular sticks I was finding were not on the QVL for this particular motherboard. The problem is the QVL is extremely out of date. They have plenty, and that was the version 3.06 for the BIOS. We're on 3.20. It's shipped with 3.04. But they have not updated their RAM QVL since 3.06, which is nearly back to the launch of X870E. And many of their BIOS since then say includes additional RAM support. So they don't update their QVL. So they probably would work. A lot of the G-Skill Gold RAM with the 24 gigabyte modules are showing the QVL. The problem is they just aren't showing them for that specific kit. Like there'll be like 1 letter difference. So, and they're 7200 megahertz kits, which would be awesome to throw into here. Fortunately, like I said in part 1, RAM is easy to swap on this. So BIOS and such, it's already all been updated. So as you can see, we're running at 64 megahertz right here, or 6400 megahertz right there. And if we go to the advanced settings, OC tweaker. Yeah, I am set to the minus 20 optimizer at 85C max. So because we're only hitting 72C, something like that as a max, as we put it up on the screen again, the temperature curve, it didn't change like over time. It just went to there and that's it. And it fluctuates in tenths of a degree. But that was with just the minus 20 millivolt curve optimizer with PBO and TG Max at 85. I could get even a little more aggressive with those temps if I want and try the minus 30 and the minus 40. No reason to do that whatsoever. So to get those crazy scores with this CPU, I did nothing but overbuild the cooling for it, select one setting in performance preset, enable EXPO, done. And I didn't even mess with the fan curves, to be honest. Actually, I take that back. I switched them from silent mode, which is default, to standard mode, not even on performance mode. All right, I think he's gonna be happy. I hope he's gonna be happy. And I'm happy that it's done and gonna be out of here so I can move on to the next thing. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Hope you've enjoyed. Huge thanks to, like I said, Performance PCs for providing me most of the water cooling stuff that you see here, minus the fittings I got on Amazon, and Singularity Computers for sending us the distro plate, which will honestly mount in any 420 millimeter mount. It's not specific to this particular case. It's not a true distro plate in that it has outputs and returns and stuff for the CPU, GPU, and all that. Other brands do carry ones that replace the front glass to do that. I don't like doing that because then you really limit your view into the system. And I love the front glass on the NV9. And obviously the cooling and such is just fine on here. So we got to get Windows key and stuff for him so we can change these pictures. And he's going to have to do that because I don't have access to his Microsoft account. So he's going to have to do that once he receives the computer. All right. Thanks for watching. Time to go. I'll see you guys in the next one.